that camp meeting was not too long ago, and Cassidy and I were blessed enough to attend for our first time. And there was a gentleman there from the Voice of Prophecy named Alex Rodriguez, who I thought had a great seminar that we sat in on. I know it also touched Steve, and I believe Ron as well. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today. We're also going to talk about Paul's ministry. That's what we're actually going to start with. We'll move into the Voice of Prophecy's evangelism cycle. And then I want to talk about why it's important now to be out in the community doing that. Does anybody recognize the picture of this gentleman that we found on Britannica? Cassidy, you don't count. Nobody? Okay. This is George William Booth, and he is the founder of the Salvation Army and was also a Methodist preacher. And he has a rather famous quote that says, "Most Christians would like to send their recruits to Bible college for 5 years. I would like to send them to hell for 5 minutes. That way, they may see the reality that awaits those that do not know Christ, and what a call to evangelism that is." So, evangelism, as defined by the Oxford English Dictionary, is a message of spiritual good news. Acts 26:17 and 18 defines that a little further, and I like it a little better. "I will deliver you from the Jewish people, as well as from the Gentiles to whom I now send you, to open their eyes in order to turn them from darkness to light, and from the power of Satan to God, that they may receive forgiveness of sins and an inheritance among those that are sanctified by faith in me." Which kind of leads me to the question, is evangelism confined to just a spoken message? The dictionary and biblical definition clearly have something to do with the message, but do we really need to be preaching to someone to get that message across? Or is a simple kindness in passing at a store or on the street, does that get it across? How we carry ourselves in our neighborhoods or as we're talking to strangers, the language that we use, or any work that we may be doing in the community. These are all ways that we can evangelize, whether we realize it or not. Anything that makes somebody ask what's different is a job well done by you. Paul is a great evangelist from the biblical accounts after his conversion. He tells us in 1 Corinthians 9:19 to 22 that he tries everything to reach his fellow man. "For though I am free from all men, I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win the more. And to the Jews I became as a Jew, that I might win Jews. To those who are under the law as under the law, that I might win those that are under the law. To those who are without law as without law, not being without law toward God, but under law toward Christ, that I might win those who are without law. To the weak I became as weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all men, that I might by all means save some." So even Paul knew that he wasn't going to win everybody, but that didn't mean he wasn't going to try. Paul's model for evangelism centered on what I consider to be 4 main pillars. The first was finding common ground with those he was looking to speak to, which was pretty much everybody. The second was reasoning with persistence. So, like I said, he knew that he wasn't going to win everybody, but if he would talk to them and continue in that way and show it through the way that he lived, he may win more. The third was showing compassion for those he was trying to reach. If he could come down to their level and see what it is that they were struggling with, then he would be able to gain credit with them. And the fourth was creating a community where he was evangelizing. So we talked about finding common ground when we spoke about 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 19 to 23, where he became all things to all men. Acts 17, 22 to 24, it says, Then Paul stood in the midst of the Areopagus and said, Men of Athens, I perceive that in all things you are very religious. For I was passing through and considering the objects of your worship. I even found an altar with the inscription to the unknown God. Therefore, the one whom you worship without knowing, him I proclaim to you. God who made the world and everything in it, since he is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands. Common ground is a great icebreaker. It's some place to start and a way to ease into serious Bible topics that if you just walked up to a stranger and started in on, they'd probably laugh at you and turn the other way, or would just be completely unwilling to listen. Reasoning with persistence. We talked about how not everyone will be converted immediately. That was true for Paul. It's true for us today. There are some people that turn and run the other way when they know somebody who's associated with the church is about to talk to them, or they're comfortable with the way they're living, and that's the way they're going to go. But Acts 17, verse 1 through 4 says, this was when Paul came to Thessalonica, that he reasoned at the synagogue for 3 Sabbaths, stating that Jesus that I preach to you is the Christ. So 3 weeks straight, he was there. That's the persistence that he had. In Acts chapter 17, verse 17, therefore, this is in Athens, he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and with the Gentile worshippers, and in the marketplace daily with those that happened to be there. So he wasn't limited to the synagogues either. This was anywhere he would go, the marketplace, maybe us today at a gas station, somebody we run into, wherever we may be. You always have a chance. By caring for others, he was able to gain credit with those he was trying to reach. Romans chapter 9, verse 3, For I wish that I myself were accursed from Christ for my brethren, my countrymen, according to the flesh. Basically what he's saying there is he would give up his salvation if there was just one more person that he could save, which is a pretty strong thing to say. And then I mentioned that he would set up a community in those places that he was evangelizing in, and there were some different steps to do that. First, of course, he had to get there, and his habit was that he would go to the synagogue, and he would start his evangelism there. And after a few days or one day, whatever it may be, he would begin to win some converts. And when he did, he would mentor them and take them under his wing. And when he got them to a certain point, he would decide that it was time to plant a church there. Acts chapter 14, verse 23 says, So when they had appointed elders in every church and prayed with fasting, they commended them to the Lord in whom they had believed. So once the people had become strong enough and they had picked out the people to lead in this church that he had planted, he knew it was time to move on. And not until then would he do it. And even after he did move on and had turned control over to these elders, he would still check back in with each church. So, statistically speaking, our pastor has a church in Marion County and a church in Shelby County. The population of those two counties as of 2022, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, is 1,014,457 people. And this is a couple years ago, but you get the idea. So if the pastor on his own had to reach out to those people, that's a real big number. And I talked to him, and he said that's probably not realistic for him at all. If we add in the elders of both churches, we get another 6 people. That takes us down to 144,923 for each elder and the pastor. So our elders here, does that seem realistic for something you could do? Tom, you going to go talk to 144,000 people? No? So if we get the whole church involved, the people that are here every week, we bring that number down to 9,481, which still a large number, but much more reasonable in the time that we have, that we be able to reach at least the majority of those. Matthew chapter 9, verse 37 and 38. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest truly is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore pray to the Lord of the harvest that he send out laborers into his harvest." So it is imperative that we all get to work now. Move on. Evangelism for today. As Jesus called his disciples to preach his gospel, we have also been called, as I just talked about. Mark chapter 16, verse 15 says, "And he said to them, 'Go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature.'" I know many of us don't feel very comfortable talking to people. I am not much of a public speaker until today. And others may not really know that they'll be able to find the right words when they do run into those people. But Ellen White tells us in Steps to Christ, page 82 and 83, that you are not to wait for great occasions or to expect extraordinary abilities before you go to work for God. You need not have a thought of what the world will think of you. If your daily life is a testimony to the purity and sincerity of your faith, and others are convinced that you desire to benefit them, your efforts will not be wholly lost. The humblest and poorest of disciples of Jesus can be a blessing to others. They may not realize that they're doing any special good, but by their unconscious influence, they may start waves of blessing that will widen and deepen, and the blessed results they may never know until the day of final reward. And so we move into the Voice of Prophecy's evangelism cycle, which I briefly touched on earlier. They actually have 6 pillars in theirs. The first, prayer, and then cultivate, sow, irrigate, harvest, and perpetuate. You notice that you probably can't see it, it's probably small, but it's set up as a circle, so there is no beginning and there is no end. It's continuous. Arguably, the single most important part of the evangelism cycle is the prayer portion. This is to be done at the beginning of the cycle that you plan to start. It's be nice to get the whole church together and just hold a prayer service for what we're about to embark on. Help us to touch the people in the community. It's also to be done before each stage begins. Again, just another meeting where we may come together, ask God how we may be of service to Him and who it is that we need to talk to. Pray in your daily life and service to God. They also brought up Andrew cards while we were there. Does anybody familiar with those? So Andrew was the first disciple to bring somebody to Jesus. So an Andrew card is a card that you keep with you in your pocket daily, wherever you want to keep it, purse, pocket, car. And on that card are anywhere between 5 and 10 names of people that you want to focus on bringing to Christ. And then at prayer group, when we come on Wednesday nights, or maybe before the board meetings, or even just passing somebody at church, you stop and ask them, "Do you have your Andrew card with you?" And right there, you stop and you pray for the people on the other card, and the people, or the person that you're talking to, would pray for the people on your card. It's a way to just continuously keep those people in mind, and eventually God will deliver them for you. 10 days of prayer would be another strong thing we could do, or even just distributing prayer tracts out in the community. So we move on to cultivate. This is all about our contact in the community here and getting to know the needs of the community. Where's the community lacking? Where can we be more visible to the community? Not necessarily that we are attaching a church message to it, just that we're looking to reach out and get our faces in the community so that when we do bring our message to them, we're already familiar to them. We're not going to be kind of shrugged off. They'll be willing to talk to us. So some ways we could do that would be maybe park cleanups. I know we do picnics in the park. I'm sure that we've probably noticed there are things that we can do there. Helping in soup kitchens around the communities. I don't know I'm not familiar with Shelbyville. I don't live here. I know there is one in Greenfield. I know there's soup kitchens in Indianapolis. I'm sure there's probably one here. Gardening and cooking classes that we could hold. Just anything that would get us involved in the community itself. Next item on their list was to sow. This is where we've already become personally involved in the community. We've made ourselves known to these people. They recognize us. It's time to reach out and see what kind of interest there may be in furthering their knowledge of Christ. So we have VBS that just ended here, which would be a great way to reach out to the community. I don't think there was a whole lot of community involvement this round, but I don't know. I know at the fair booth, we were passing out information. I know we had talked about maybe putting something on Facebook, but I think we need to focus on those two steps as a way to get out in the community for them to be receptive when we put signs out and say, hey, we're having a VBS. They may be more likely to come. We also just had the Rush kids do a great service for us, going out into Shelbyville and knocking on each door, spreading some literature to them, alerting people to the radio station that we have here, which I will admit up until recently I kind of was doubtful on, just because we don't really have many points that we can pull from that. There's no data point how many people are actually listening. Are we reaching people on a regular basis? Is this just as they're passing through? But from a gentleman that started attending here, we know he heard about us on the radio. We know that some of the Rush kids encountered people that had heard about us on the radio, so I'm a little more convinced now about that. But this would be a time to do door-to-door Bible studies that we could go out and offer, even just hangers on doors. Just, we're in your community. Why don't you come check us out? Bridge events that we can do. Voice of Prophecy gives a number of them. Shadow Empire and the Serpentine Prophecy are two of their more famous ones. And that is going to bring us into, actually, last point. We may have to do several cycles of cultivation and sowing before we actually move on to the next point. Just getting us out there, letting people know. The next point is irrigate. So this is everybody's favorite part of evangelism. This is when we are going to have an evangelistic series. It's the one that's most often done and often the one that fails and tends to get us a little down, thinking that our evangelism isn't working, but in reality, it's because we haven't prepared for it the correct way. So if we don't skip those first two steps that I had mentioned, then we will already kind of know who it is that's going to show up to this evangelism meeting that we're giving. They've been involved with some Bible studies that we passed out to them. They're people that we talk to in the community on a normal basis, people we may see. And then we put this on, and we already know who is going to be there for the most part. We also, when they show up, we can't get discouraged if there are no immediate conversions, but we do need to follow up with those people because obviously they were receptive to something. They did come. Find out what it is. How can we further their knowledge of Christ? And the two, I guess, most common evangelistic series that we do are Revelation and Bible Prophecy, which I find both of those very interesting, so I would think that most people would too. The next step is harvest. So here we're going to continue to nurture those people that did decide, okay, I want to take the next step. Evangelism is not, the evangelistic series is not the last step. So we don't just throw up our hands. If nobody's receptive, there's always something more we can do. Now, that would be a time to circle back to the sowing stage and just trying to get back out there in the community. So we're going to follow up after the fact. We may bring them into the church, offer a Bible marking class perhaps that might get them on the road to studying exactly what it is that we're trying to bring to them. So Bible marking stickers, highlighters, bringing in like pieces an inside job that we've just done would be a way to keep them in the church present other things to them. Peace is an inside job, not necessarily something that's going to be religion over their head, but there will be hints of it in there. The final step is going to be perpetuate. So now we've got these people, they've come into the church, we've furthered their knowledge. Now we want to actually get them plugged into the church. So we bring them in. We maybe do church socials. Other events in the church are a great way just to bring them in, meet them, introduce yourself, make them feel welcome. Don't scare them away. At that point, you've introduced yourself, you get familiar. You can take one of them under your wing and be a discipleship partner to them. Help them in their walk along the way. These people are going to be fresh energy for this church, which we're going to need because that cycle now starts all over again. We go back to the beginning. So I didn't really think about it until I started writing this sermon. But I'm actually here today from this cycle, but it was years before this cycle was a thing. So a lot of you, I know I've talked before, know that I was involved in the Big Brothers program when I was a kid. And when we were first introduced, my brother and I would go out and it would just be, worldly things that we were doing, going to the arcade. It would be go-karts, batting cage, anything like that, just getting to know each other. Eventually, he came to me and asked if I would want to attend church with him. I said, well, yeah, sure, I'll go check that out. So we began going to church every Sunday. And shortly after that, summer rolled around, and he said, well, how do you feel about maybe doing the church summer camp for a week, and I'll go down there and be a counselor with you, and we'll just see how it goes. Okay, sounds good. Then, so we did a few years of that, and I decided that it was time that I wanted to dedicate myself to Jesus. And so I got baptized, and I missed that last step of getting plugged into the church. And so pretty quickly, I fell back away, just because there was nowhere for me to really fit. I was still young at the time, so there wasn't a whole lot of opportunity. I definitely no leadership roles, but really nowhere for anybody to take me under their wing, except, of course, for my brother. But he, at that point, had moved to Florida, and so there was nobody keeping me under their wing and keeping me in the Bible. And so I fell away. And now here 15 years later, I've come back to church because that seed was planted then. So we've talked about, not always the people that you talk to are going to be receptive, but you will plant that seed for them, and they may have an opportunity in the future to come back. So we are going to move on now to signs of the times. This is why evangelism is important to us now, today. Luke chapter 12, verses 54 and 56 says, "Then he also said to the multitudes, 'Whenever you see a cloud rising out of the west, immediately you say, a shower is coming, and so it is. And when you see the south wind blow, you say, there will be hot weather, and there is. Hypocrites, you can discern the face of the sky and of the earth, but how is it you do not discern this time?'" So we need to be sure that we are not getting caught up in the superficial things in the world today, and we see the Bible prophecy that's unfolding in front of us right now. There are some current events that are going on that should kind of have everybody on edge. The 10 Commandments now being required in every classroom. Louisiana was the one to lead out on this. They're requiring a poster-size copy of the 10 Commandments. Some of us may be thinking, hey, that sounds great. We're getting God into the school system. The caveat to that is God does not force himself on anyone. So forcing those commandments in there is not something that's of God. And the other thing to worry about is, what Sabbath do you think their fourth commandment is in reference to? Is it the biblical Sabbath, or is it the counterfeit? The other thing, that just recently the Supreme Court has given immunity to the president for any decision he makes while he's in office, or she. I don't know what this election may bring, or elections after that, which should be alarming, because that just kind of paves the way for the Sunday laws coming back, death decrees to be put in place. I see I didn't read the verse that went with the first part, but the second part, Revelation 13, verse 15, he was granted great power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. So here we can see this prophecy being played out. Also, the push to a cashless society, which Canada has already started embracing. How easy would it be for the government to shut down our ability to buy and sell if we don't do what they want? If everything at the push of a button can be shut off, no money, no opportunity. Revelation chapter 13, verse 17, and no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or of the name of the beast or the number of his name. It's all very alarming. This goes along with the IT crash that we had yesterday. A lot of banks weren't working. There were some issues with the medical field, airports, all that. Just a little bit of IT problem, and the whole world goes down. And so they want to push us to this cashless society, which doesn't make any sense to me, because if we just had that issue, why would we want to go all digital? I don't know, but that's what their push is. So it's now our turn to turn the world upside down. Colossians 1 verse 23 says the disciples proclaimed the gospel to the then known world in a few short years. So we've all been called. We've talked about that. Our success or failure depends on the way we take hold of the work in front of us. Do we have any gardeners in the crowd? Anybody that likes to garden? Okay. So my favorite part of gardening, we've spent the summer, we weed and we water, and we kind of toil out there. My favorite part is when you go out and everything's come on all at once, and you just take your baskets out and you pick everything and you go back in and relax. How many times has that happened to you guys? Never? Okay. It hasn't happened to me either. But that just kind of illustrates this isn't a thing where we're going to go out and talk to people and everybody's going to come in. There's careful work that's going to have to go into this. You're going to have to get to know these people, go through. You'll be able to see the people that are ready to come into the church, the people that unfortunately you may have left out too long and they've just become so worldly they don't want anything to do with you. There's going to be people you run into that are still a little too green for you to pick and bring into the church, but you will have an opportunity to circle back to them, or at least to keep working on them. John 10, verse 16 says, other sheep I have which are not of this fold, them also I must bring, and they will hear my voice, and there will be one flock and one shepherd. So it's our turn to step out into the harvest. There's work to do in the community, and I know there are people that are going to be receptive. But first, we need to step out and spread His word. It's time for us to get a little uncomfortable. It's going to happen. But we need to remember that this is not our home. We're just here recruiting. Thank you.